another week in the For Your Reference household, and it is another review on a very important, very integral film in Black cinema. We are hot off the hashtag Oscars So White, but shout outs to Michelle Yeoh and even more shout outs to Angela Bassett. Cinema is powerful when those that live it tell it.
Oh.
Yeah, there will be a bit of a focus, a bit of a discourse where we discuss, Black cinema and I guess the trauma throughout the decade. So feel free to stick around, friends and lovers, even if you haven't watched Till. However, I will say at this juncture, there will be a trigger warning. Given the nature of the unfortunately cut short life of Emmett Till and a lot of the discussions that we'll be having today, we understand that if it is going to be uncomfortable, especially because we'll be talking about lynchings, we can talk about justice, but it being 67 years, maybe not too late, but it definitely took a bit too long. We would implore you, friends and lovers, to go and do your research, perhaps more than a Nicki Minaj swollen balls research. But also at the same time, we would love to plug and shout out our friend and lover, Country Boy, that does the One Mic Black History podcast. He does have a Remembering Emmett Till episode, as well as a lot in regards to the NAACP, Black Panther Party, and a lot of Black history in general. So definitely plugging One Mic Black History, and come with us, friends and lovers, and let's get on with the show. Friends and lovers, welcome back to the For Your Reference podcast. You got your host, Katie.
And OT.
Trace the ancestral lines where love envelops pain.
Ooh.
Gather strength and community with Till this week.
Nice.
Ooh. We've been saying it, friends and lovers, that we were going to cover it, and we have finally come to this juncture. Again, thank you, friends and lovers, for joining us. We understand that this isn't going to be the most jovial of podcasts, but like channeling a lot of pain, perhaps we might find some levity or maybe some connected sort of comfort we can have along the way. Let's get into stats and general information. In regards to director, we have love-lauded splooshes all around in the For Your Reference household. Chinonye Chukwu in regards to writers. We also have Chinonye, as well as Michael Riley, Keith Beauchamp. This film was released and premiered in the New York Film Festival of October 2022. It recently came out in 2023 in Australia in March. Thank you to Universal for giving us the opportunity to watch a preview screening before it came out in cinemas here. In regards to cast, OT. Danielle Deadweiler or bust. Literally no one else exists for me. Wow.
100%.
Jalen Hall will always have my beautiful heart forever and always. Sean Patrick Thomas, Whoopi Goldberg, Tar, EGOT winning Whoopi Goldberg. Go and check out our Tar episode, I guess, friends and lovers. Frankie Faison, and also a shout out to the actor that plays Willie Reed, Darian Roll.
Nice.
Well, I guess let's do an emotional check-in, because this is a very heavy film that is grounded in reality. How are you feeling, OT?
Oh, good. Eager to talk about this.
There's a sentiment that you've shared, in recent years of the podcast of not wanting to see Black people suffer. And I think that might also have been spawned off of the Tarantino run, which obviously makes a lot of sense as well. We kind of talk about the Doctanian sort of edit, and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to check in, but let's get into first impressions. You're more than welcome to spoil it. But like I mentioned, the first sort of questions and theme that I have is talking about, Black pain and Black cinema in general. So feel free to stick around, friends and lovers, but we might spoil it in our first impressions. OT.
Wow, where to start? Yes, I have said a few times that I'm tired of watching black pain and black suffering on screen, and I still feel that way. I think by the way Till was done, it was quite different.
Yeah.
Even juxtaposing this with Emancipation, you could tell that the directions they took was quite different.
Yeah.
Something like what we got with Emancipation is your cookie cutter sort of slave porn.
But it's happening in 2020s. Like that was
I'm like, yeah, it was one of those sort of disappointing things that Foucault has done, and I'm like, bruh, we don't need this.
But go back to Training Day.
Yeah.
Let's stay there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with what Chinyone did here is different. You know, it's not showing us or the masses and whatnot. It's telling a story that needs to be told, something that still, you know, this happened 67 years ago. The issues faced then are still here.
Can you run it back one more time, Oti?
Issues faced then are still here. And it's one of those really sad things. And I think the performances of Deadweiler, bloody hell, man. Like, it shook me.
Yeah.
It shook me. There were moments in the film where I just didn't know how to handle myself.
Yeah.
But here we are. And I think it'll be a very interesting discussion because of just how good the movie was.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I guess just encapsulating my thoughts on this film, I guess just to give a bit of context, you know, as a brown girl in Australia, what the fuck do I know about Emmett Till? But, you know, a lot of black culture, whether it's talking about hip hop or whether it's black films, like even without trying, even just by consuming black media, I was aware of Emmett Till. First in name and then, you know, getting on the Don Cheadle algorithm internet and trying to learn a bit more about this 14-year-old, which again needs to be contextualized as well. What I believe the power of Till is to have an unflinching reminder that young black people, young black men, young black trans women continue to die in the same means that they were lynched many, many years ago. And that's not an easy thing to say. A lot of things become political sort of commentary. You know, many times we've talked about on the podcast of particular states in the US wanting to rename slavery as involuntary relocation, you know, banning books because it makes people uncomfortable. So even the superficial veneer of what people might call American history is even making people uncomfortable. So, you know, the divide between those that want to talk and face real shit and those that don't want to talk about or want to continue to coddle those that are comfortable continues to widen, you know. There's a reason why Lindelof and our Holy Year of Regina King, which every year is the Holy Year of Regina King, Watchmen. There's a reason why there's so much commentary in that show that makes it so compelling. It isn't distended from reality. You know, Tulsa, Black Wall Street. There's so much context to get into if you want to. And again, it really depends on where you are in this world. But we're not about banning books, and we're definitely all about, you know, embracing the information. You know, like I talked about, there are differing sort of accounts because no one was really in the store aside from Miss Brandt as well as Emmett Till. So I'm not necessarily interested in going through the different sort of variations. We are going to dive into what is portrayed in the film. However, I do want to outlay that it is disgusting that even to this day, Miss Bryant admits that a lot of the stuff that she testified wasn't even true. And even though she admits that, there's no sort of recourse for making things right. The brother and the brother-in-law, they admitted for $4,000, I think it was, that they did it and they shot him and they essentially got away with it. It's fucking frustrating, but I guess for those that know that. So, you know, I guess you could say this was in 1955, so what the fuck does it have to do with now? I guess it depends on what part of the internet or what sort of news you're consuming. because to me it was made very clear that it's still fucking happening today. Even if the word lynching is something that sounds something that's old-timey, it's unfucking fortunate. And there's definitely a lot that I want to talk about today, but I just want to echo what you were saying. The directing, the performances, and the messaging, and the importance of who is behind the pen and in front of the screen really drives home the importance of a film like Till.
It sure does.
Well, let's get into the themes. We will definitely talk, there's a couple of key scenes that I want to talk about in Till, but I am also conscious of the fact that, whether it's the greatest film or whether it's the not so greatest film, there's definitely a catalog that exists of Black pain, Black trauma, the effects of slavery, which is also extended to colonization as well. So there's definitely a lot to talk about in regards to Black cinema. And even the fact that, you're not, you're not Idris Elba, so you are a Black critic, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are a Black film podcaster. So I also want to be conscious of the space that we have. And, as much as possible, you do try and support, but I'm also conscious of that emotional sort of toll, that is expended on your behalf for us to cover shit that we know is important, but also it can be a hard sort of thing. So in regards to this particular theme, I want to talk about Black pain and trauma, the guaranteed success formula of Hollywood.
Wow.
Yeah. So I have a couple of questions. I extend and I open the space to you, OT. I will let you lead, but I do want to talk about it just, in the senses of you in this space, as well as the offerings that are out there in context of what has come, even if it's not by, Black directors or writers or even performers in particular senses. So the first thing I want to start off in regards to Black pain and trauma, do you feel that films that depict, the disparity in systemic racism and lynching and slavery, do you feel that these films are still important?
It depends. I think it depends on how it's done and how it's directed and how it's laid out. I think most of the time what we get in the ilk of the 12 Years a Slave or anything in that sort of regard feels a bit dated. I think I'm speaking for myself. I don't want to watch that anymore.
Yeah.
And that's why last year was so different when I got to see Nope, and I felt emotions that are so rare.
Yeah.
After a movie is finished that has predominantly Black people.
Yeah.
Where it's not geared towards suffering, it's not geared towards the trauma we have to face, or even the bloody realities we have to go day by day. Mm-hmm. It's all nuanced in the movie, yes, but it's done in a way that it's a thought.
Yeah.
It's once you've watched the movie or while you're watching, you can think about it and you can sort of unearth the meaning behind it. But while you're watching it, you're coming up with something that felt fresh.
Yeah.
That felt celebratory to my regard. And I think that's the direction where I feel needs to be done more. And I know the directors out there, the Tyler Perrys who will be doing comedy in their own right.
Yeah.
Fair enough, But I think for the majority of the sort of mainstream Hollywood, we're still a fair way to go before we get there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's good to know that as soon as you saw, those semblances of Black joy in Nope, as soon as you saw it, you could recognize it, right?
Yeah, you can see it, and even the fact, going against the grain and having characters that are not rooted in the stereotypes and the onus that we feel that we need to liberate ourselves from.
Yeah.
All those issues are important and all those things need to be talked about. But I think sometimes we just need a fucking escape once in a while. Yeah. And that's why Emancipation felt like such a letdown. It felt like you're dragging us back to ridiculousness.
Okay, well, this isn't even a question that I have, but I might bookmark it, and if we get time, we'll come to it. But I feel like you've mentioned 12 Years a Slave, you've mentioned Emancipation. I would argue that there are differing qualities in regards to both films. It's not, they're both heavy, and that's why. like there's a difference in quality, but even if the quality is there, it's still hard to watch.
Yeah. I don't think quality is what makes it more digestible or anything like that. Because at the end of the day, you're still seeing a black person getting whipped, a black person getting eaten by a dog, a black person, fucking hell.
Yeah, I get that.
So,
and also behind the scenes, a white person spitting on Will Smith in Emancipation. We're not getting spicy?
Nah. We'll leave that to stand-up comedians to go on.
Am I Chris Rock and you're on Netflix and you're going to edit me out?
Yeah.
Well, what you're saying comes to my next sort of question in regards to black pain and trauma being a successful formula in Hollywood. If it's acknowledged that these films are important, is the onus on non-white people to watch/learn from them?
Not really.
Because you're saying it's important, but you're also saying you don't want to watch it. So if it's important, is it on non-white people to watch it?
I'd say by this point, if you've not learned anything from any of this,
yes,
then Farah, what are you waiting for?
Thank you.
So in as much as it has a space, I think that space has been filled to the brim. And the audience must do the work if they feel like they need to learn about this stuff.
Yeah.
Not to wait for 13 years a slave,
Yeah, because there was a lot of centering of whiteness in there, but we'll come to that. That's very interesting. So you're saying it's high time. You should have learned by now.
Yeah, man.
Like, why do you need to see black people brutalized for you to understand their humanity?
Or to even feel like that's the only, like many a times, anything that gets recognition that's black has been anything to do with slavery.
Yeah.
Anything that's had to do with black pain or trauma.
But then you still only have Halle Berry and Michelle Yeoh. Well.
Yeah, that's a different thing. But when we get something completely different outside the box, are there audience members out there that would feel, if you're not centering around white guilt and all that, can they still come and watch? And would it still get nominated?
Well, no and no. Or I would say nope and nope. Because if you're not centering whiteness and non-black people don't understand what it is, then obviously it's not going to be acknowledged.
I guess not.
Well, I guess just closing this particular question, if these films are important, it seems like you're like, these films can go. But I guess the question I have here is, does it still need support from the community? And I would also point in your direction. You didn't even care for Emancipation, but you let it play to get the stat for Apple.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if I agree with it or not. I still have to watch it and support.
Man, you'd be a perfect father, wouldn't you? I fucking hate you, kid, but I'll support you.
Yeah, you've got to support. You've got to go through, man, regardless.
Okay, all right. So if these films are important, were the previous offerings centering whiteness also important? Or do we just throw away all of the films that were created by white people about black pain?
Oh, they'll play a part.
King Kong?
Yeah, well, you're the one that gave King Kong a high rating.
Yeah, but I also had very poignant thoughts and analysis in our review episode.
You did, but to me, in as much as I could understand all your points and all the nuances and all for the time, I draw a line in the sand. And if you cross that shit, I'm not gonna vibe.
Okay. All right. Well, before we go to the pivotal scenes in Till, I just wanted to ask, so if these films are important, does it matter who are telling these stories now? We talk about Indigenous storytelling, or I guess just, ownership of storytelling as well as story sovereignty. Do you feel in a subject that has been flooded, whether respectfully, responsibly or not, do you feel now that we're in the 2020s, like as an example, the bill didn't get passed until 67 years, the anti-lynching bill in the US. Do you feel like it's important who is telling the story?
Yeah. We've talked about a lot of shows that the people who the story originates from tell it in a way that can never be replicated by any other group. We even watched Res Dogs a few months back. And it's one of the best things we've seen on TV.
Yeah.
You kind of a black fella going in there and doing like, hey, I'm going to do Res Dogs. No, it's not your space.
Well, there's a whole history of black natives and Cherokees, but we don't have time today, friends and lovers.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's get into some pivotal scenes inside of Till. Thank you, friends and lovers, for continuing to join us. You know, I thought it was important to talk about it, not just in the sense of, you know, covering particular films, but I also understand, you know, a lot of people, even Black people, are like, you know, I'm not watching this, or this is going to be too heavy, or, you know, so I am conscious of the fact that people might not be watching this film. So I wanted to have a little bit of a conversation around that. But let's get into some pivotal scenes that we have in Till. Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. Feel free to stick around, friends and lovers. We love you so much. The first sort of pivotal scene I want to talk about is between Mamie and Moses. So I guess sort of setting the scene in the film, you know, there's a lot of conversation even with Alma, you know, Mamie's mom, talking about the boy needs to go down and be with his family, but also understanding the danger, the difference being in Chicago as well as being in Mississippi in 1955, right? And, you know, there's so much sentiment that gets shared. And, you know, we even had conversations, you know, while we were watching and also afterwards as well, you know, but Mamie shares sentiments in the film, you know, lines like, when you get down there are different rules for us. You can't look at white people. You need to be small. And, you know, even from a film point of view, you know, living particular experiences where, you know, I guess, you know, we might not necessarily be the norm, or we might not necessarily be the ones that can just walk down the street without thinking about the optics or where we are or who we're placing and who we're interacting with. I wouldn't say there were frustrations, but there were moments, you know, because at the end of the day, like, Emmett's only 14 years old, but he would carry himself in a way where he didn't have any sense of danger. And that was something that we would talk about.
Yeah, he did. And I think even while watching this, when you see Mommy trying to tell Emmett not to do certain things, he took it as a joke. You know, he felt, oh, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know, I'm just a kid. It doesn't matter if I'm Black.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just felt very, very sad watching that scene and thinking, oh my God.
Yeah.
There's literally no sense of danger or anything like that in this child, because he's a child.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be having to worry about how to behave around different people.
Yeah.
But that's still something that people have to do right now.
Exactly.
Which is wild.
Which, you know, even before we talk about Mamie and Moses, because obviously there are a lot of scenes that interconnect with this particular theme. There was a young family that had a very young child, like a baby, right? And she was talking to Mamie about, you know, always being fearful and, you know, making sure that her children are going to be okay, you know, and that's where we hear Mamie share the sentiment of she raised him with love for 14 years. The hate just won't hold. Mm-hmm. And that's sad. Like, it's sad to know that something as simple as being a fucking kid can mean something completely different if you're a young Black boy. Like, a kid can be a kid unless they're Black.
Yeah, and that's what was so stark in the movie. You know, clearly you see he's a kid, and when he goes to Mississippi, he is treated like an adult.
Yeah.
He is looked like, you know, it doesn't matter. He's Black. He's not a kid.
Yeah.
And the interaction in the store just blew me, man.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand what was going on there. First, the cousins, you know what? I was angry for a bit. Regardless, I know it wasn't right, but the cousins were there. They knew what was going down, and they knew Emmett was fresh as. They let him just do whatever, man. And the minute they saw that interaction, they kept quiet and didn't say anything.
Yeah. Knowing
how exactly it is down there. I don't know. I was so frustrated by a lot of things. And that should be the least, that shouldn't even be a frustration, because kids should be allowed to be kids.
Well, that's why I'm going to break the matrix for a second. Were you frustrated watching characters in a film, or were you frustrated because you knew the implications of what that does to Black kids?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. Because they're still kids as well.
Yeah.
And for them, yes, they've grown up in Mississippi and they know how to behave around white people.
Yeah.
But the onus still shouldn't be on them.
Absolutely.
It shouldn't. There shouldn't be an onus of, hey, don't talk to a white lady.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll get beaten up to a pulp. That shouldn't be a scenario we're talking about.
Yeah.
But in as much as it happened, I still feel like I feel so wrong saying this, but they should have spoken out.
No, I get what you're saying. It's like he should have been able to be a kid, but also because of that, he needed to navigate differently.
Yeah. But Emmett doesn't know it like that.
Yeah.
His cousins do. They saw that interaction. They saw that lady's death stare.
Yeah. It wasn't going to end in a great
And in
way.
the movie, they played it as if the older cousin knew exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Because he kept on talking about it and even feeling as if he really wanted to tell the dad.
Yeah.
And he just didn't. Maybe he thought, I'll wait until tomorrow morning and say something. But that was too late, unfortunately.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Let's go to the scene of Mamie and Moses. And the reason why I love this film is because unfucking fortunately, a lot of the struggle never has a right answer, you know, especially if we're talking about literal systemic oppression, right? And what I'm talking about is when Mamie finds out that Moses actually had a shotgun and she was trying to, there was a little bit of grace in her thinking or just wanting him to verify whether the shotgun was there that night when they came for Emmett. But I want to talk about this scene because this is the conflict and this is the beauty of filmmaking. This is how you make and break hearts, friends and lovers. But we have this scene where Mamie is, you know, in a very indirect way, trying to get information about that night. How was it so easy for Moses to give up Emmett, you know? And there's even a sentiment that Mamie says, you chose yours over mine. You chose yours over mine. And that's fucking heartbreaking, man.
It's heartbreaking. I think there wasn't much Moses could do without endangering everyone.
Well, he even said it wasn't just them. It was the judge. It was the sheriff. It was everyone in that fucking town on the doorstep then.
Yeah. And whatever action he would have taken, it would have been applied to every black person in that town.
Yeah.
And not just Moses and his family.
Yeah.
And I could see the sense in what Mamie was saying, but I took it as a grieving mother trying to lay blame, rightly so.
But that's what I'm saying. You can understand both.
Yeah. I could understand, but I could understand that I could give her the space to be there and to feel that way. But also acknowledge that Moses didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
If he took action and shot the guys, the repercussions of what that meant was far greater than what he could probably even comprehend at that moment. So, man, I just couldn't. It was heartbreaking. It was really heartbreaking.
There's a tempering of the pen and there's a sharpening of performances that brought such a poignant scene. Because it's just what it is, right? And it's moments like that absolutely, you know, really, really hit me emotionally in this film. And, you know, Moses was also one of, if not the only black man to testify and also make it out alive.
Yeah.
In the South, in Mississippi and money. But man, it's just one of those things where, you know, film and cinema is absolutely a way to create dialogue. It's also a way to surface just ironic, contradicting, conflicting truths.
100%.
Speaking of, I do want to talk about, you know, we talked about having differences of opinion and that sort of thing. I want to talk about the choice to have an open casket for Emmett Till. As we know, this is grounded in real life. Also, unfortunately, you know, George Floyd, June 2020, all around the world, protests, Black Lives Matter. And hopefully, whether you posted a black square or not, you're about it. You're still advocating for the lives and rights of black people everywhere. But it became, you know, and I will link this back to Till, you know, it was so important, or rather it was so pivotal, integral to the Black Lives Matter movement in June of 2020 for that footage to be circulated, for that truth to come out, right? And unfortunately, years, months, days, weeks, we're continuing to see not just young, but we're seeing black people continue, whether it's police brutality or otherwise, continue to, lose their lives, right? And even within that dialogue, there are conversations about whether the footage should get released or not, whether the family are consenting or not, right? And then it also goes back to what you were saying. You were talking about film, but even just generally, how much more footage do you need to see of Black people dying to understand that this is fucked up, right? So I'm bringing it back to the open casket. Until there were, radio, TV spots that were talking about, and you can even hear Black people talking about it as well, saying that it was distasteful. They shouldn't have had an open casket. There were people that were saying this definitely people need to see the truth. So there's definitely, it's not a monolith and there are differing sort of opinions as well. And I wanted to talk about that scene.
I don't think how that scene would be disrespectful to anyone, or that decision to have an open casket. I think it was needed to showcase the brutality Emmett went through.
Yeah.
The brutality Black people go through. It spoke so much more. You could all write words of what happened, but that doesn't hit home as seeing the brutality of it.
Yeah.
And how Mommy decided, because that started a conversation. That created outrage, and that what changes things. Not sitting behind something and reading an article saying, oh, this is how it was done and a Black kid was killed. And, that doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
They're used to that shit.
Yeah.
So show them the brutality and let them face themselves.
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
think even when we were watching the movie, they were like, oh, that's probably not even Emmett. That's something else. It's the decomposition making it even look worse than it's supposed to be. I'm like, bruh, this is what you did. Face it, look at it. And they wanted to distance themselves from it because of its gruesome nature.
Yeah.
So it worked. And that decision was, I'm pretty sure it was the hardest thing Mommy had to do.
Yeah.
And I'm glad she did.
Also, something that Mamie did as well was her work with the NAACP. Shout outs to your friend Kevin Carroll, Alton from Snowfall. Playing Rayfield Moody. It's cool to know he plays super staunch Black men, Black Panthers and Snowfall. He's in the NAACP here. The scene that I want to talk about, it's actually a collection of scenes, throughout for the NAACP. I guess the first sort of one is where, Moody comes to her, and it's got to be a very precarious thing. And I'm sure even you, speaking to your experiences of being in Kenya and fighting injustices, and, your favorite topic of corrupt politicians and that sort of thing. It must be a hard thing to do, to have the lived experience that is necessary to move and inspire masses, but to also find a way to, I guess, embed that into policy or to get lasting sort of change.
Yeah. And you could tell they had an aspect of the long game.
Yeah.
And in as much as that's really hard, especially when you're faced in a situation like Emmett Till's, they had to try and pivot and say, hey, they probably knew that they're not going to get a conviction.
Yeah.
Not in Mississippi.
No.
And they knew it was an opportunity for the long game to turn Mommy into the voice.
Yeah.
So that she could inspire other people. She could awaken the anger in a lot of the people for them to stand up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that comes to, the scene where Moody comes to visit her and they're out on their patio / porch. And he's trying to do that, but she's still grieving. Like it's still just happened, right?
Yeah.
And again, we haven't even had a chance really to talk about Danielle Deadwyler's performance. But this is, of the many times I got very emotional watching this film, Mamie's, I think she says something of the lines of, my son is dead. And it just rings out. And it's one of those things. And, even when we get further into the film, there are mentions of the lynchings of Lamar Smith as well as Reverend Lee. We're also introduced to Theodore Howard as well. And they're talking about the NAACP and how it can actually help. And like you said, how it can have lasting change. And Theodore says to Mamie that this doesn't end when the trial ends. This is going to be a one-sided verdict. We need to plan beyond that.
Yeah.
Also, the person telling the story is who is in public favor.
Mm-hmm.
Man, man, it's difficult to be able to do that, but it's also important to be able to organize and to lobby and to really entrench the importance of Black rights, especially in a country like the US.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the courtroom scene. Again, talking about Danielle Deadwyler's. You know what I also appreciated in this film, OT?
Oh.
We had some real guttural, crying, emotional scenes.
Man, I could not handle when Emmett's body was being transported and it was just arriving at the station in Chicago. And Mommy was there crying,
wailing,
and it was just reverberating, and everything else was silent apart from that. I just too many. I could not handle it.
It was a lot.
It was too much.
We all have different life experiences, friends and lovers, and if you've never experienced it, I would hope you would never have to. But even being in funerals, depending on the circles that you're in, they're not the funerals that you see on TV and in the movies. Like, there's some real fucking pain, and there are generations and decades of fucking pain that gets laid out into the coffin and sometimes gets buried with our kin. And Danielle Deadwyler brought that to this film.
She did.
If you've ever experienced that, or if you've ever seen that level of pain, on some level, you got to appreciate the rawness in the performances that she brought in this film.
The way she performed that was just the visceral nature of it.
Yeah.
I could not, because I had to just stop.
Yeah.
I think we had to pause for a bit just so I could recollect, my thoughts and just shake it off a bit.
Yeah.
But wow, it was such a powerful scene.
This isn't the sort of little cry you do in your work bathroom during your lunch break, Like, this is, anyway, the performance that she brings, especially in that scene when she's in the wheelchair. They even mention we're going to have a wheelchair there, in case you need it. It's fucking heartbreaking. And what I wanted to talk about in the courtroom scene is part of what would make, the case fall apart is that they couldn't, aside from the ring, of Lewis Till, there's no way to identify the body aside from the ring that was there. So it was very important to have Mamie's testimony. And in that moment, she talks about, as a parent, her hands were always busy. And every single day, it was Emmett in one hand and her hand doing, whatever else for Emmett at the time. And dressing him and caring for him and loving him, raising him with love. She knew every part of him.
She did.
And being able to, and we even see the scene when they're in the morgue and she's doing exactly that. And there's nothing more frightening than the vulnerability and the ability to be honest and go there. And that's absolutely what Chinonye and Danielle did in all of these scenes.
Yeah, and a ridiculous part of my brain was like, oh man, her testimony would probably let him move someone in the jury. Let him move.
You forgot what the jury looked like.
I did, but I was like, I don't know. Someone, anyone, just stand up and say, nah, I can't stand for this.
Yeah.
No one really gave a shit. And that's the saddest thing. Hearing all that, seeing Emmett, and no one blinked an eye.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just wonder, man. Just fucking wonder.
You can wander in my arms, my love. Warm and safe. But yeah, there's so many beautiful things. And I guess while we're talking about beautiful things, I want to give some praise to the lighting of black skin in this film.
Oh.
Honestly, because I don't think, when films are being reviewed, I don't think it's talked about enough about the lighting of black skin and the skill that it takes to light black skin.
Yeah. I know Lena Waithe has talked about that a lot. And we got a rendition of that in Queen and Slim's theme of Black Love.
You still feeling away?
Nah, I've let it go. But yeah, 100%. But the techniques on the display, it just shows people have work to do.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Oh, well, thank you, friends and lovers, but also thank you, OT, for taking this journey with me. We're going to finish off in a segment we call For Your Reference. OT.
I am gonna reference Nope.
Yay!
Let's have some fun. Let's experience the joys of being black. And that not being the only thing that centers us to this world. Because we are humans and we can experience joy and other emotions.
But you can also be sad like Angela Bassett, because it's okay to be sad.
Yeah, she can be sad all she wants. Doesn't fucking matter.
I feel like you're about to tell me to keep her name.
Anyone trying to drag Angela Bassett is a fucking idiot. She's allowed to feel any way she wants.
Mm-hmm.
It's disappointing she didn't win. And she's entitled to it.
Oh, absolutely.
She did the work.
Yeah.
So her not doing fucking backflips a second after not receiving an award she probably thought she's going to get, because they've led her to believe she's going to get it, they can piss right off. Piss right off.
To be fair, I kind of opened that, even though you said you weren't going to talk about the awards.
Man, you lure me into this, eh? Such a Pennywise.
Wow. Awkward segue.
Be a Chucky. In a world full of Pennywises, be a Chucky.
Is this what they call deflection? Is that what you're doing? Awkward segue. Finish the lyric, OT. If you are a big, big tree.
We're a small X. XXX.
Wow, through way of Nairobi, friends and lovers. All the way to Jamaica. We did talk about Steve McQueen. I will be referencing the anthology series Small Axe.
Oh, look at you.
If you would like to love and wail the Wailers, Bob Marley, if you'll pardon the pun. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, we're @ForYourRepPod.
Or you can write us an email at hello@forpodcast.com.
We're also on the podcast if you'd like to leave a rating review, and we'll see you guys next week.
See ya.
Bye.